have set out on a jihad to punish President Trump and those who supported his policies. They do this through censorship, discrimination, and impeachment. Very few Democrats are showing the wisdom to recognize that these actions threaten to do much more damage to the nation than the few hundred people who broke the law on January 6th. I'll go over this in the preamble and discuss it with our political panel in mere moments. Not one, but two GOP congressmen are scheduled to appear tonight. We're curious how they plan to represent their constituents when the socialists have stripped away the rights of the Republican minority. And many of you have expressed concern about leftists taking over our government. You've watched your voices being silenced by big tech, possibly violating laws passed by your elected representatives in the process. Many are waiting for the next shoe to drop. Your emails ask me how Newsmax will navigate a federal government that appears to be dedicated to delivering for China rather than standing up for the rights of the American people. We'll ask Ken Chandler, Newsmax media executive editor, about our struggle to give fair news and unvarnished opinion in the era of Biden's socialist Democrats. Meanwhile, speaking of Biden, remember Joe in his basement? He promised he would heal the nation. He promised he'd bring America back to normal. After January 6th, Biden labeled the mostly peaceful protesters as terrorists and thugs, never once distinguishing from the overwhelming majority who violated no laws on January 6th and those relative few who did. We said that Biden had already failed America even before his inauguration. But now Biden's socialists are following his lead. The left wants surrender, not unity. That's the inescapable conclusion we have in tonight's preamble. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, along with almost every member of their socialist caucus, are pushing for the impeachment of President Donald Trump. They say he incited an insurrection. Did he? You be the judge.
We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Peaceful and patriotic. I guess to a committed leftist, those words are fighting words. When BLM and Antifa were killing, beating, looting, and burning their way through America's streets, when they were capturing territory in cities like Seattle and declaring them outside of U.S. jurisdiction, what were Democrats saying? Here's radical Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley.
I'm looking to the public. You know, this is as much about public outcry and organizing and mobilizing and applying pressure. These governors that continue to carry water for this administration, putting the American peoples in harm's way, turning a deaf ear to the needs of our families and our communities, hold them accountable. Well, make the phone call, send the email, show up. You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives. And unfortunately, there's plenty to go around.
Okay, unrest in the streets. I guess to a committed leftist, that language is okay and not deserving of condemnation, losing your social media platforms, or being recalled. What about socialist Maxine Waters?
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Nothing says respecting our institutions like calling on mobs to threaten and intimidate those serving in government. Many of our followers, by the way, did just that. They got in Trump officials' faces, kicked them out of restaurants, bullied them, you remember. What about the Speaker of the House, the gourmet ice cream lover herself, Nancy Pelosi?
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be when people realize that this is a policy that they defend. It's a horrible thing.
Wow. The Speaker of the House of Representatives putting out a dog whistle for a, quote, uprising. No calls for her to step down. No banning her from social media. Lastly, what about Biden's pick for VP, Kamala Harris? What was she saying at the height of the BLM and Antifa violence and destruction?
Some of the success that we've been able to achieve around criminal justice reform would not have happened in recent years were it not for Black Lives Matter. And the intensity and the brilliance of that movement that forced at least that there would be some counterforce to the status quo, which is so reluctant for change, if not hostile to change. They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And they're not, this is a movement, I'm telling you, they're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
Okay. Yeah, she said the intensity of the movement, you know, it got pretty intense there, those fires around America. Biden's pick for VP there, folks. She didn't want the violence to end. She called on it to continue. Wow. Andy Ngo is a journalist who is a minority and is gay. He has made a career of doing the job the biased press refuses to do, covering the destruction of Antifa. He's written a book. I suggest you pick it up and read it. But I'm a conservative, you see. I encourage reading. The Democrat socialists and their militant arm, well, not quite so big on education. Watch Antifa's idea of tolerance at a Powell's bookstore.
Stop selling any of what? 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 Stop selling any of what?
How long before they're chanting, burn Andy Ngo's book? If all of this is shocking to you, well, it should be. If all of this is news to you, I'm quite sure I know why. It's because the left-wing press has decided you don't need to see all of this anti-American, boorish, and completely telling behavior from their chosen party and ideology. All of this has a cumulative effect.
Bottom line, the Democrats are a bunch of hypocrites, troublemakers, and fucking idiots.